Welcome to Bleav in the Arizona Cardinals, part of the Bleav Network, joined by former tight end and Super Bowl 33 participant Ed Smith. My name is Javon Adams. Be sure to subscribe, comment, rate, and follow this podcast and tell all of your Arizona Cardinals fans and friends to do the same. You can also watch us on Bleav TV around the country, in airports, and on YouTube. Read the top Bleav stories at si.com and follow us across all our Bleav socials. Bleav in the Arizona Cardinals. Again, my name is Javon. You can call me Jay or J Love, and he is the one and only Ed Easy Smith. What is good, my brother?
What's going on, brother Jay? As far as everybody's concerned, after the draft, we got 32 teams all going to the Super Bowl this year because all these drafts are, everybody had an A+++ draft, not actually, but actually, I'm actually glad that the whole process is done because it's almost they drain us, bro. From after from between the end of the college season, combine, all the mock drafts, and then we finally get to the draft, and it's like, oh my God, I'm just glad we're finally done with it.
Yes, indeed. So the Arizona Cardinals in the 2025 draft had 5 picks in the draft. We talked about they had 7.
Yeah, they had 7. They had I saw in your notes. I forgot to mention they had a. Let me see. They had a 6th round pick at 211 and a 7th round pick at 225.
Gotcha.
I'll get you up on those too.
You can fill in the blanks on those. So going through in terms of looking at some of the players and maybe just some of the weaknesses and strengths with the players that they brought in. One of the things that we talked about last week when we went over the drafting of Walter Nolan was kind of maybe some of the needs. Of course, some of those needs were addressed in free agency, and so wide receiver, defensive line or edge, offensive line, cornerback, wide receiver. And so looking at those, and so let's go through. Looks like we have the Cardinals really focused on, now correct me if I'm wrong, but really focused on the defensive side of the ball with their picks for the 6th and 7th, where defensive as well, right? So it was very defensive focus.
Round 6, they took Hayden Connor, offensive guard out of Texas. Round 7, they took Keaton Crawford, a safety out of Nevada, to add to the defense.
There we go. So let's get into a couple of these. For one, looking at the needs, because oftentimes when it comes to, especially when you get into the later rounds, it comes down to maybe you don't know the names, maybe unless there are certain quarterbacks that are falling. When you look at a Quinn Ewers that I think ended up going to the 7th round, and when you have like a Shador that ended up going to the 5th round. So some of these names that you hear, or a Scatteraboo, Cam Scatteraboo from Arizona State, where we are, that ends up going. So there's certain name recognition that you have, but for the most part, maybe you've never heard of some of these players. But we'll start wherever you want to start. Maybe let's look at on the edge side of the ball. So if we're looking at, what is it, the 3rd round pick, was it Jordan Birch, I think, from Oregon? What, if anything, out of all these picks, did any of these players stand out to you just in terms of when you look at some of the strengths? Because a lot of this comes down to just having faith and trust in Monti Ossenfort and his team.
Well, I'll tell you what I like, Jay. I like the fact that for the first time in any of the regimes, we've been doing the Bleav in the Cardinals podcast 6-7 years now, but for the first time in any of the regimes, and we're going back to who was our first coach with who had 1 year and done, and then we went through the
my man that went on to Cleveland. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And they were all under Keim, and Keim is the GM, and he had a philosophy that I didn't necessarily agree with. We were just willy-nilly, right? So now we got Ossenfort and Gannon, and what they did was a couple years ago, they stripped it down to the bone. Didn't re-sign some free agents that we had in house that we thought was like, well, how are you gonna let those guys go and then not go out and get other free agents to take, like, big time free agents to take their place? They weren't spending any money, but they had a good draft. And it was like, well, you can't do it all through the draft, Fast forward to year 3, and they are actually still doing it well with the draft, and I'll get into that in a second, but we're also now spending some money when you go out and get some of these free agents, bringing a Sweat, bring a Calais Campbell back. We're not getting the best of Calais Campbell, but it'll be great in that room and teach some of these young guys. and be a guy that instead of maybe 60, 70 plays, you get 30, 35 plays out of him, whatever it is. But with the draft now, the thing I'm most impressed about, it looks like they have a plan. They have a set, like you said, these are our needs. Let's go address them. You go out and get defensive linemen, to add to this line, which could be a very deep group now for them. You get edge rusher. You get, first round, you spend it on Walter Nolan, defensive lineman, DT out of Ole Miss, So now you're hitting these spots and you're not just willy-nilly doing it. It looks like they have a plan. And, they spent a lot of equity on the defensive side of the ball this year in terms of picking up even the safety in the 7th round. You got cornerback, you got DT, edge rusher, and they only had 7 picks. The one thing that I thought, and I think in the first when we did the podcast the other day, I thought they might do a little more wheeling and dealing to up their number of picks, trade out of this to get 2 of that. And, but with 7 picks, I think they did a pretty good job. The only thing that I have is I would have liked to maybe pick an offensive lineman higher than in the 6th round because that's normally what we do. But like I said, I like what they did on the other side of the ball so much. You can't have everything. And at least they did address the position, meaning they got another offensive lineman in there. We'll see what they do with free agency, and et cetera, et cetera. But I actually like what the Cardinals have done because no longer is it just close your eyes and throw something at the dartboard. Oh, yeah, that looks good. Yes, let's do that. Trading away your 1st round pick for Marquise Brown. My mama called everybody else called him Hollywood. I call him Marquise because mama named Marquise. So it's like, that was the type of stuff that killed us, though. When you think back to those years with Kingsbury, and those are the type of things that stunt an organization's growth. You can see what they've done. We thought we were crazy when they picked up Trey McBride a couple years ago. Come to find out, that was probably one of the smartest things they did. So I don't know everything. I think I know stuff sometimes. I don't know.
Well, I want to get back to like your evaluation or just kind of your cursory look at these picks that come in. But isn't that something, because you hear about this after the draft is done, the first thing they talk about is the draft grades and what do you think? And a lot of it, and we just talked about this on our terrestrial show, is that a lot of these grades it's just a wait and see. I mean, they're just so arbitrary. Absolutely. Because you don't know how all the variables that come into play with these players when they're getting to an organization. But is this where faith comes in? Because Trey McBride, is it possible? Keim was flawed, so I'm not trying to say I want him back. It seems like Ossenfort has a plan and he's executing on that plan, even though we may be wondering why aren't you being more active in free agency right over the last couple of seasons, but this season it seems like he, off season more so. But could it be that Keim had a plan because he knew that the tight end that we had there, Ertz, that he was going to be on his way out, and because he was going to be on his way out, wanted to try to draft his replacement, that being Trey McBride, and we should have had a little bit more patience with him, or had he used up all of his patience with us by that time?
I think he used up most of his patience with us just because of how they operated, and I don't know. Like I said, it turns out to be a good move, but right. Sometimes, I mean, was it this a saying that I use sometime I hear, even the sun shines on
is right.
No, sun shines on a dog's blank every now and then as well. I mean, gotcha. It's just one of those things where every now and then you get lucky and stuff works out. But like I said, with Ossenfort and Gannon, I'm really feeling it in terms of, and I've done some other podcasts and stuff like that, and other teams are noticing it. You bring up a great point, though. Like one of the things that I found interesting, all the draft grades were given out, and all the pundits, it's like, wow, now everything's on paper, and now everybody wants to grade it, right? And at the top of the grade list was the only A given, full A, to the New England Patriots. There were some A minuses after that by other teams. For the Cardinals, we sank all the way down to 26 with a B minus. And the reason we got a B minus is because there's a whole lot of things that could happen with this class depending on the health and motors of certain players. For instance, our cornerback in the second round, Will Johnson. The only reason he dropped to that spot is because he had a knee injury at the University of Michigan. Otherwise, everybody, and I mean everybody, was saying if not for that knee injury, he was a top 10 to 15 player. He would have went in the first round. Instead, we got him with our second round pick. So, okay, is that a steal? Is that a great deal? Well, what if he comes back, Jay, and the knee just never quite gets right, and he's not as good as he would have been if he didn't have the knee injury? Or what if he comes and they give him time to get healthy, and he just rolls, and he turns out teams are like, dang, we should have took him, So you don't know, but everybody wants to put a grade on it. Everybody wants to have their say. Cardinals come in with a B- at number 26, when I'm thinking that can't be right. There are some teams that I saw their drafts, they didn't do nearly as good as the Cardinals did. So with all that being said, Jay, it's all just a bunch of everything is on paper right now. You and I just talked about we won't find out, and then they can put the little shells on at these rookie mini camps. Then they'll come together in a few weeks and do a full mini camp, and then you'll have their OTAs during the off season. Then they'll finally get to training camp, and you put the pads on, and now they don't hit as much, so you won't see as much. Like we used to have hitting drills, they don't hit as much, and they don't hit on consecutive days. But the days when they put the pads on, that's when you'll find out who is truly going to be a potential star in this league. And then you get to just the preseason games. Nobody's even playing in those games anymore. The first month of the season is kind of like that, preseason now. When we'll get our first real glances at some of these kids, I call them kids because they're young men coming into the young men coming into a grown man's world. We'll see who can hit, who can keep up with the conditioning, the strength is unbelievable. Wide receivers you'll be covering as a DB, who can make you look stupid if you get your footwork twisted. You got to be physical at the line of scrimmage, keeping them on the line of scrimmage. Defensively, you're on the line playing against dudes. We used to play against one dude that might be an NFL player. Now you're gonna play against 5 of them on the defensive line. Coming off the ball, firing at you, double teams. How fast can you process all this stuff? All these things will be answered when it's amped up later in the year. As far as all this other stuff, they got the best grade, we won't know any of that. It just gives us something to talk about. But until they put rubber to the road, Jay, when it really becomes full contact, full speed, we won't know anything. One of my favorite, I said earlier, one of my favorite sayings, body like Tarzan, hit like Jane. I'm sure we got everybody on every team looking at their draft board and who they got in there. Wow, that's looks unbelievable. And look at that, when you get them out there amongst the men, we'll find out who's ready to go.
So let's I'll go 1 through 5 and you finish the 6 and 7. So just to list off who they got and then throw a couple questions at you. So round 1 with pick 16, they selected Walter Nolan, DT from Ole Miss. Round 2, they selected with pick 47, Will Johnson, cornerback from Michigan. Round 3 with pick 78, Jordan Birch, the edge from Oregon. Round 4, pick 115, Cody Simon, linebacker from Ohio State. Round 5, pick 174, Denzel Burke, cornerback from Ohio State. And then I'll let you go.
Round 6, they picked Hayden Connor, offensive guard out of Texas, with pick 211. And then in round 7, they went with Keaton Crawford, pick number 225, a safety out of Nevada.
And so one of the things that is they're addressing needs as opposed to best available. So they address needs, maybe not as my brother Ed Smith, for those who are listening new, or maybe you forgot, Ed wants offensive line and defensive line addressed no matter what, as early as possible. He loves that. Can't ever have enough defensive and offensive line help. But it seems like they went after needs instead of going for best available, because sometimes you might just have a plethora of talent at one position group, but you didn't go after the needs for another. And that these players, I think for the most part, looks like they have upside, but they have to be developed. And this is where it falls upon the coaches. Do you have the confidence in the coaches to be able to coach up the defensive side of the ball here? Since that's really where they went after the overwhelming majority of the picks.
Yeah. At this point in time, you have to have it, because otherwise you got a lot of undeveloped talent out there. And if you don't have the proper coaches in the proper places teaching these kids how to be professionals, then you got one or two choices. You continue to roll with them, or you roll over them. One of the things I found interesting here, Jay, and we just did the count, out of the 7 picks that the Cardinals had in this draft, 6 of them were on the defense side of the ball. They picked one offensive player. Now, here's where it gets interesting too, Jay, is what we now have to do. We have to look at the free agent signings of the Arizona Cardinals, meaning because every team, how many draft picks you have, the most important, we talked about it last week with the job of the GM. Now you would think, okay, I got to draft I can take a break. No, the work really becomes now, because all the players that didn't get drafted out there, the second the draft is over, everybody is scouring their phone list, going down the list of who didn't get drafted, and call him as fast as possible. We'd love to have him here as an undrafted free agent on our team. You got to call him now, though, because guess what? 31 other GMs having their people call this same guy and 10 or 15 others that we want. So the work is not done, because there are plenty of kids that make teams that weren't drafted in this draft, and they become valuable members of, practice squads. They might not be ready now, but, you get them on your practice squad, maybe later this year, next year, they're ready to go. So the easy part is done. That's like sifting through the good fruit at the grocery store. The good stuff's on the top,
True. True.
So you grab it. Ooh, that smells good. That's ripe right there. That's ready to go. The stuff is not quite ready. It's a little green still. All that stuff is on the bottom. And you got to, once you get down there, that, hey, okay, I'm not ready for bananas yet. But in 4 or 5, 6 days, these right here are going to be ripe. These are the ones that you don't get these to eat today. You get those to put on the counter, because in 4 or 5 days, when I'm ready for my smoothies, protein shakes, and stuff like that, I'm ready to go. So that's what you have to do. And that's where, like I said, the easy part is the draft. That's picking from the top of the stuff right there. Now you got to be, and this is where GMs make their money. You make your money by going and finding those valuable young free agents that can turn into a valuable guy on your roster. That's where you get the credit. I don't give you credit for picking a first-round pick. You could put me on the board, you could put me in the room, show me your board, and I could have made the first-round pick for the Cardinals, because, I would have known the needs. They would have said, this is what we're trying to do. Go ahead and do it, Ed. Okay, this is what our idea was. Hey, I'll get it. I'll take that one right there. Like I said, the hard work comes in the later rounds in the draft, when you get to 5, 6, and 7. And then as soon as free agency opens, you better be the first one on the phone calling all these young men. So next thing you and I have to do, we have to comb the board and see what free agency signings happen for the Cardinals. Then I think you get a truer grade of, what they accomplished with this offseason. You got to go free agency, draft, free agency, unsigned free agents at the end, and then whatever comes later, because you got some veterans out there and stuff like that. But that's the whole. And so, as a GM, you never sleep, bro. You're always on the horn, try to make stuff happen. But that's what's next for them.
Bleav in the Arizona Cardinals. He's Ed Smith. I'm Javon Adams. I got a question that comes out of that. The question is, since the Cardinals didn't make any trades during this draft, could it be because this draft was not necessarily, this draft was, we can find enough, the players that we want, there's enough of them, everybody's kind of in the same range, so to speak, so we don't have to make any drastic moves, so we're fine? Or is it that they set their board up the right way and their needs in the right way, and they didn't have to try to reach for somebody because there was a run on certain position groups?
It's not conceivable to think that their board fell exactly the way they wanted to. That just doesn't happen. There's too many variables, too many teams looking at all the same players, especially as you get further into the rounds. What happened is and you brought up the first part, is this was a draft with, this wasn't a superstar draft. After the first 3 or 4 or 5 players, it was like, okay, everything kind of evened out. So with that being said, they might have had their eye, okay, as we're getting, and I'll, go back to like when you're drafting in the fantasy world, you got 3 players that you would like to have. We don't, and in fantasy football, you don't draft up, trade up and stuff like that. But imagine if you could. I got 3 players I got my eye on. If one of them gets taken, okay, I can live with that. I'll get this one. If the other gets taken, okay, I'm getting close enough where I'll get him. If all 3 of them are taken, or if I really want that guy, I'll trade up. But if not, I got a 4th option because it's all so even. There wasn't like what you, and then, so what happens is you get further down the line. Is it worth it to give up, even if it's a 5th or 6th pick out of this year's draft or next year's draft? Do I want to do that for a guy that if I get him, okay. If I don't, okay, I'll move on to my next. That's, if you fall in love with somebody, say you get to a round and it's like, man, I can't believe he's still on the board. Are you kidding? We had him with a 2nd round grade and he's in the 4th round. Oh no, we got to go get him. That's when you go move up. But otherwise, we had a 3rd round, 4th round on this guy. He's there. That's what we're going to take. And that also shows maturity, Jay, because instead of just jumping all around just to jump around, hey, we're good. We're just going to stay right here. We got 7 picks in this draft. There wasn't anything to move up for. We stayed where we were. We got a nice, crop of young men out of this. So to me, that's a positive because we didn't see him just all over the place and doing stuff just to do it. Now, I did say last podcast we did, I thought they were going to be wheeling and dealing because we only had a certain amount of picks. I thought they might try to stockpile, go from 7 to get up to 9 or 10 picks. But this wasn't a draft where you wanted 9 or 10 picks because as you got further down the line, there does come a point, Jay, when you're looking through that fruit on the stand, and it's like, man, that's going to be here a week from now. I'll come back and get that later.
I want to look at the 6th and 7th round picks again. What schools did they come from?
Texas and Nevada.
Okay, all right. So here's what that thought that came to my head. Oftentimes, is the fact that they all come, except for Nevada, come from big time schools? Is that something to keep an eye on? Or, and the reason I say that, or because sometimes you can find those really talented. You can find those really talented players, but they're in lesser known institutions, right? So does this tell us something about what they're looking for here?
That is a great question, Jay. And I got that same question yesterday on a show I did. And I thought about it for a split second, and I was like, you know what? It makes a lot of sense. Here's the thing: when you go to some of these smaller schools, and let's be real, Jerry Rice came from a small school. Josh Allen came from a small school. Wyoming. You can run down a list of players that have come from schools. And what happens when you have a Jerry Rice or a Josh Allen at a small school? They look like Hercules, bro, because the talent around them is so diminished. And nothing against them because nobody drafted them or nobody recruited them to these big-time universities. Somebody missed something, but they came up short in terms of landing where they wanted to. They went where they had to go, and they looked like superstars because they were playing against a whole bunch of guys who were going to be getting degrees to go do other things other than play football, right? So when you are evaluating them, sometimes you have to look at them because you don't know what they're. A lot of people weren't sold on Josh Allen when he came to the league. They were like, he's wild, he's all over the place, he's this, he's that. But he looks so good against these other schools. It's like, dang. So you have to judge his talent against who he's playing against. When you're going to the big schools, you have more, like you get a cornerback out of Michigan. This dude is tried and true tested. Right. Playing against Ohio State, playing against, all the Big Ten schools and the SEC schools and stuff like that. And it's like you have a better scale of the jump for him is going to be smaller because of the talent he was playing against. Everybody in college doesn't go to the NFL, but he was playing against a whole bunch of dudes that eventually will. And his jump to the next level will be smaller than a guy playing at a D2 school or Wyoming or whatever. His jump is going to be incredibly large because of the talent match. So I think with the Cardinals, I think it's a smart point that you bring up. And they went with guys who played in big time competition. Ole Miss, in the SEC, Michigan in the Big Ten. I mean, you go down the list of schools, other than, like you said, Nevada, that's one thing. They got 2 Ohio State players back to back, a Texas guard, Oregon DT. So they went after it in terms of the bigger schools. We'll see. And maybe that was their philosophy. We don't know. Or maybe they just – here's the other thing I'll throw at you, Jay.
Okay.
And this is going – and I thought about this as well. Because of NIL, we're going to see lesser and lesser of those diamonds in the rough. Because remember, in college, you got to stay till your third or junior year. Yeah. So if you go to
if you go to a San Jose State and then you're going to jump up to Oregon.
Bruh,
and then
you're going to Oregon. Yes. Yeah. So we're going to see less and less of those smaller schools having representation in the drafts because those big schools are going to go cherry pick all of those young men. And hey, come on over here. We got money for you, and it's a better environment. You're going to be playing big time football. So we're going to find lesser and lesser of the kids making it to their junior year at the smaller schools because all the big schools are coming and knocking, and they're going to. And we've already seen how much jumping around there's been. It's only going to get worse. So, like I said, the day of finding those diamonds in the rough or having to find them is probably going to go away because you're going to find more of these kids at the bigger schools because they're cherry picking now.
All right. So on behalf of the one and only Ed Easy Smith, this is Javon J. Love Adams. This is Bleav in the Arizona Cardinals. Make sure you tell a friend what we have going on here as we get into the off-season mini camps and OTAs and all that good stuff. We'll definitely be back. And then, of course, when the preseason begins and all that, will be here on a much more regular basis. But make sure you stay locked. And if you subscribe, that way you'll get notified whenever we drop a new episode. But until then, as we always like to say around this time, you can.